So, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. It's a very exciting conversation today. We've got both Sherrie Hatfield and John Avery here, who are originators with John Mace of the Mace Energy Method. So, very much looking forward to hearing your experiences, your journeys, your evolution with this thing from the very beginning. So, do you guys both want to take it in turn and just tell us a little bit about yourselves? What you do, who you are, and then we'll go more deeply into your experience, John. So Sherrie, do you want to start?
Well, yes, my name is Sherrie Hatfield, and I've been engaged very deeply with MEM and Causism Institute for 20 years now. And it's been an amazing journey, and it has been an evolution, most definitely. And so I delight in all that we've been experiencing, what we've witnessed. And of course, my favorite role, and which the role I play the most now, is a Causism trainer of practitioners. So, and it's expanding, and it's really it's a beautiful wave right now.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. And John, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I was there. I probably need to explain that John Mace and I were friends from in the late 1960s, and we both did basic counsellor training, and we were both interested in helping people. And but over the years and later, getting up to the late 80s or 90s, we both kept saying that what we were doing was very good. We were helping people, but something was missing. We've got to find it. And John was the main one that kept saying that. We've got to find what's missing. We've got to find what's missing. And so I stayed in touch with John. John traveled to America. There was something going on over there with some people that we'd trained with, but they've gone ahead a bit more with some new things. And he was over there quite a few months. And I was interested. So when I retired in about 96, I think that 96, 97 that was, I decided to go over and have a look at that too, and spend a couple of 3 months over there. And then traveled. I live on the east coast of Australia, and I drove over the other side of Australia, which is quite a few thousand kilometres, and spent some time with John, and wanted to fill him in, because from when he was there and I was there was still a bit of new stuff, and he wanted to know. So we got together, and quite miraculously during that time, I was doing some of that work on him one day, and suddenly he had his eyes closed and doing some of the old style, and it wasn't the style that did this, but suddenly his eyes popped open, and he said to me, "I found what's missing. I found what's missing." And I said, "Oh, great. I've never seen anyone so excited in my life." He suddenly realized the part that was missing. This is when he realized that our mind makes images of what we have our attention on. That's when he first realized that. And then he said, "Quick, let me do this on you." so that's my story. And John and I have had a lot of, we've been together and done similar things over a lot of years. And that was a great time. I probably spent about 4 or 5 months over there. And from that, the Mace Energy Method grew, and that sort of thing.
All right. So when you say you retired, John, does that mean you retired from counselling? And then it was like...
No, I retired.
Retired.
I had a business.
Oh.
When John did quite a bit of work on me at one time, and I went back to the eastern states, like I wasn't counselling. I'd sort of given it away because I wasn't happy. We're getting good results, but not permanent results. And I felt, not quite right about it. And that sort of thing. So he did some work, and I went back to a business I had, and I'd done a lot of promoting months before. And the marvelous part about it, as soon as I got back, people kept ringing me all over the place. And I said, I finally started to ask them, why are you calling? "Oh, we got your promotions 3 or 4 months ago. Why are you calling now?" And I wanted to know why they're calling now. And I suddenly realized they hadn't changed, but I certainly had. And it's like my flows open up, and all sorts of nice things started to happen. So that's about it. I mean, later on, I'll tell you about the development. When you're ready, you tell me about the development of the different processes and what happened in the early days. I was there with John through the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. One thing that's got my attention though is can you share what it was in America that you guys were exploring? What this new stuff was you were exploring there?
It was just a type of counselling, but they reckon that they thought they'd found some new processes, but truly it was still people telling you their life story. And so I just call it, I mean, their intentions was wonderful, but the results, they were getting a little bit better results, perhaps. They'd found a few new ways to get people to look at things.
Right. Cool. So yeah, well, tell us then, tell us about this development of the process from that.
Well, when we first started, as you know, when we have a new client, we find somebody's what we call their ruin, which means it's the basic thing in their life that's got them off. I call it off balance. I call it, and we started doing that. Probably about 99, 98, 99, I think it was. We started doing that, and then John and I were staying in contact, and then he suddenly said one day, he said they're doing great and they're loving it, except they're going home and they're having relationship problems. So then he said, we're going to have to do something about that. Well, then the process was put together at what we now call relationship repairs, which repairs all the all the stuff in someone's personal relationships that's causing them personal trouble. And that's how things developed as we went along. And then we had that, and then it developed further. And I can tell you one part I'm very happy about is that we started to train people over here in Queensland, and I'm a long way away from John, and things were going quite good. But I had a young lady that was doing well on course, and then she'd go away and then come back, and she was having trouble. This is when we're still learning, and we'd learnt about everything in life. You have to start it, you have to persist at it, and you have to complete it. And so I said, it doesn't seem like she, I started to think, what's the matter? What do I need to handle? And then I said, the poor dear, she's not handling the persistence part of this. So I just put something together one day and started to handle that on her, and she had a great big win. And then I wrote it up and I turned it all to John. He said, oh, that's great. He said, you've only missed one part. You've also got to make a decision before you do all this. And between the two of us, the whole thing put together, and that's the one we call productivity or activity procedure. And it's different things addressing different things that people need, and that sort of thing. So that's where it went from there. There's some lighter moments, because I had the privilege of training Sherrie here in the early days, and it was funny, as things developed, John used to write and send me things in the mail. Being an old boy, I didn't have a computer, and he did. And he kept telling me, you've got to get yourself a computer. I'm sick of writing things to you. John Mace was a beautiful guy with lovely in what he wanted to happen. And he said, you've got to get a computer, So finally I got the computer and that sort of business. So
and here you are still now using that computer for all of this.
No, I'm onto it now. No, I've since then. No, yes. Done hundreds of sessions over Skype. But there was a lighter moment, because the first time that Sherrie and John Mace and I had a meeting on Skype, on the old Skype, they connected up and they wanted to talk, and both Sherrie and John had Apple computers. And they kept telling me, why don't you get an Apple? I forget even the name of the one I had, Livorno or something. And anyway, when we had the first meeting, I was the only one who could connect the three of us up. And by fluke, I must be honest, it was more of a fluke. And so I did tell them, you need to get a proper computer, you two. And this was all done with love and a bit of fun.
Absolutely.
So as things have gone by, as little problems showed up, new processes using the basic. There's just one basic important piece of data, and using that, like this has been aligned up to process different things as they came up. And, you know, we got to notice.
Yeah.
And now I think we have a very full thing that can handle just about anything that comes along and handle it pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so real evolution of, so was that key recognition of the role of the mind and the images, but then the evolution of the process and all the procedures that went around it. And so tell me, John, because I feel like I'm kind of missing a bit when, so you guys were doing whatever you were doing that led to that realization for John about the images, but what was that like? What was that stage like before you actually said, right, here's the process for the ruin? What was that? Yeah, pre-stage.
I know. Once John realized about the mind making images of what you have your attention on, well, then he put the process together. You know, he slowly put a process together. You know, and that was modified, and then, you know, it was a couple of it was done early on, and then it sort of got better. But there's been like lots of other developments. I've been happy to be involved. I think it's worth mentioning that after I'd been going a year or a couple of years, I had a couple of teachers from the Steiner School. You know, one teacher came and then the other teacher, and they were absolutely thrilled. And then they called me one day and said, like, they were thrilled. They said, we've got a few children at our school, and no matter how much, we can't seem to help them. And we think you could. Well, I said, I haven't actually done that before, but let me think about it. So then I slowly put some stuff together, and we got the first children. I had to get, in Australia, you have to have a blue card, which is permission to work with children. The police check you before you get one of those. And so we did that. And finally, you know, some children came, and I found that in about 20 or 30 minutes, you can do absolute marvelous things with children. They haven't had all the life that we've all had that needs addressing for upsets and things that have and done. And they were most beautiful. There's some lighter moments, if you'd like. And I mean, like a little boy that his mum and dad had broken up, and we were just looking for the feelings to help him find them and then help him delete them out of his system. And he was angry and he was sad. And then when we finished with these, I learned very early about this. The little boy was there, and part of our process is when somebody handles a feeling that's been bugging them, you know, the original idea was to say, can you say I'm sad right now and tell me it's true? And I said this to the little boy, and he stood up and he said, John, what's the matter? Can't you see me? I'm happy now. He jumped all over me. But from that, you know, beautiful experiences with children. And I've had so many. I could go on for a lot longer too, but I think I will mention one more. A little girl that came, and I asked her how she got on. I was looking for things where she was having trouble in life. You know, how do you get on at school? And, oh, that's good. And the other children, no, this is good, that's good. How do you get on with your mum? Oh, great. How do you get on with your dad? And she immediately broke into tears and started to sob. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. What's the matter? She said, I'm very frightened of my dad. She was actually shaking. She was about an 8 or 9 year old. We handled a couple of feelings and she brightened up. You know what I mean? And then I said to her, when you think about it, got more polished by then. I said, when you think about your dad now, how do you feel about him? She almost looked at me like I was completely stupid. She said, I love my dad. Like, what are you talking about? She didn't say, what are you talking about? But the look told me. So I don't know if that's what you want, Helen, but
yeah, it's great. Great, John. And that was such a big part of your work, wasn't it? To work with young people and children. It was your natural.
Yeah, well, I was the first one that started, and then I got the privilege of writing up to train the other. You know, it's quite simple. Long as the children like you, you know, and you've got to be very careful to listen to them, you know, not be sort of bossing them around and that, and until they feel okay. And John Mace came up with some little parts of it that were very important. He said to children, you know, when they come in, there's only one difference between you and I. And they say, what's that? My body's a bit bigger than yours. But he'd say, I'm not talking to your body. I'm going to be talking to you. Is that okay? And they start to smile immediately. And all these little things like help to relax the situation, you know, and then children will just follow you sometimes better than adults do.
Yeah. Can imagine.
Is that right, Sherrie?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, John, before we hear more about Sherrie's journey, I'd love to hear about your personal experiences. So you said there that after you'd worked with John with it, your flows opened up, people were coming and getting in touch with you. Can you tell us more specifically what it was like for you before and after experiencing the Mace Method yourself?
Sherrie?
No, you love John. Yeah, what it was like for you before and after the Mace Method.
Oh, me, pardon me. That's my problem. You're dealing with a young bloke, Helen. I thought you said Sherrie. I know. Well, I've told you when I came home from over the east, when he first did it, like people started calling me, everything started happening. And, you know, like I handle life so much better. You know, like upsets don't seem to happen anymore. I just handle them. Like, you know, things go wrong in life and that, but you just handle them, and that's all there is to it. And you know, it's just put me on top of things. And it's like, well, I will go back way before this. I got some counselling many years ago, and it really helped me. And I had a bit of a rough upbringing and a divorced mother, and, you know, a whole lot of stuff going on when I was young. And when I'd handled all that, I came out of that session that day, and I still remember, oh, this is unbelievable. This is what I want to learn how to do. And it was like I found my path in life. And that's what I feel that happened because of that. I'd been a tradesman and done different jobs, and then this is the best fun I've had in my life.
Amazing.
You know, you feel like you're being very useful, and when you make someone happy and give them a good session, it's like you're getting a session yourself at the same time every time.
Yeah, it is wonderful to see people shift in that such short space of time. Yeah.
Yep.
Would you, John, because I guess I'm comparing it to my own situation here, would you have, prior to you having your Mace sessions, would you have said, oh, I've got lots of emotional problems? Or did you kind of think you were doing okay in life before you had that experience?
I was doing okay. The original counselling had helped me, you know, and that sort of business. And I realised, I don't know, it's like and doing the training as a counsellor, not the actual data, but the actual training of how to do it, did me a marvellous lot of good. And from that, I've got something else that I do, you know, and I taught at we have a thing in Australia called the TAFE, training and further education. It's when people leave school and they do a bit after work and in the night time. And I taught at that school for well, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, only part-time, but had a lot of fun. So the training that I learned, that's been marvellous too. And I've had a lot of fun helping young people to learn that sort of stuff too. And some of our practitioners too, by the way. Yeah, so no, I just sort of got on with life after that.
Yeah. Is that the communication stuff you're talking about there then, that training?
Pardon?
Is that the communication training you do?
Yeah, the communication training.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I'm a bit hooked on that. I believe all young children, you know, in their teens should learn that before they have their very important relationship in life and before they start their serious job. It'll make a marvellous difference. I could go on a lot about that, but we are talking about the Mace. But just quickly, the headmaster at the TAFE college where I started, and he came by one day, he said, we've been looking for someone like you for years. He said, all the other teachers say the boys are twice as easy to teach since you did that. And there was more than one or two of the boys, when I sent them home, they've got to go home and try each part out. And I had more than one or two when they're getting towards the end of the course, when they tried it out at home. I had them tell me, I think I've just talked to my mum and dad for the first time in my life. Is that all right, sir?
Wow.
And so then I'd say, who made that happen? And sometimes oh, I did. I said, so don't you come back in a couple of years and tell me you can't do that, will you? You know, I had a lovely time with these kids. They were just great, you know. Gave them a lecture about being responsible at job. And if you get a job, you work, the boss owns you for 8 hours a day and you do your job and you'll always have one. And, you know, because I started work when I was 14, so I understood what they should be doing, I think. Anyway, that's just a little side thing to the Mace.
Well, yeah, it is, but it's also brought up for me the you know, that the mission statement, the purpose of Mace, to get people empowered and back in charge, living their own lives and dreams. And what you're sharing there for me amplifies the fact that the Mace method absolutely helps people with that emotional aspect, cleans up their reactivity, including around, you know, as you said about the activity procedure, getting stuff done in life, because all of that really helps us feel empowered. But so does learning things like how to communicate well. And my senses and my experience of it so far is that when we've cleaned up emotionally, it's so much easier to learn all the other stuff, because we're that old thing of we're not getting in our own way. So it's like the whole world of personal development then opens up much more easily, because, or any kind of development, you know, learning to be a plumber or whatever you want to do, it's like it's so much easier when you're not in the emotional tangle. So I think it's very related, John, because it sounds very much about that empowerment piece. I can now have effective communication with people. I can now, yeah, engage healthily. So yeah, brilliant.
I know, and learning, and you've triggered me if it's okay, but we better let Sherrie tell a bit of a story shortly. But I remember one of my clients, she was I think she's a physiotherapist, and she might have been training, but anyway, I'd done sessions on her. She was very happy. Done a session or two on her, and she's very happy. But she'd been studying university, and it was getting hard for her. So I used the activity procedure and cleaned her all up at one time. And then, you know, she wrote me a little bit later, wrote me a most beautiful thing about how that she could get all her all the things that she had to do, get them in on time for a change and without any stress. And she finished up getting honours in every single part of the course from then on. And like how happy she was. And all that did was just made her confident about persisting, starting, persisting, completing, and very important, you know what I mean? And as you know, and we all know now, that there's those 4 things we have to do, and some people are very weak in one and very strong in another one. But if you're weak in any one of them, well, then you don't get the results you want. And when we have a way of taking away all the not too certain bits about every 4 things, and people just go back into control then.
Yeah, it's fabulous, really fabulous. Yeah, great. Thank you, John. So yeah, you're quite right. Let's hear from Sherrie as well, and transition into your journey with the Mace method. So take us all the way back then, Sherrie, and kind of bring us back to when you very first met, I think, John Mace, wasn't it? John Mace, who you first connected with?
John Avery was who I was introduced to.
Oh, okay.
Yes, because I live on the East Coast with John. So John Mace lived on the West Coast of Australia in Perth. We live on the Gold Coast.
Right.
Yes. So, well, my introduction to John has its own big flavor. And of course, I've been doing a lot of different work and diving into personal growth and development, knowing thyself. There's many ways of expressing that, but I had been intently engaged since I was about 25 years old. I had been in a severe state of depression, so much so that I decided not to be here. And I had 2 little girls and a husband, and I can still remember the point of that whole experience. And of course, I can look back at it and tell you the pieces. At the time, I didn't know what was going on, but I was hearing, oh, well, I'm no good. I can't even look at the children. I can't look after them. So look, I'm going to leave so that they can have a good life with their father. And then I was like, well, I can't do that because I wouldn't be able to live with myself. So then it was like, well, I'll take the children and Darren can have a good life. And it was like, well, I can't do that either. I can't look after the children. And so in that process, it was like, oh, I'm the problem. I'll take myself out.
Mm.
Now, in that experience, there is a peacefulness, there is a calm. And I'd done counselling way, way back as well. You know, I'd gone into that, not at this point, but my journey led me to this path, if you like. And I can remember having this overwhelming, like, oh, I can tell you now what that really was. It was, I believed I had solved a problem. And that peacefulness is not wanting to die. It was the peacefulness of the noise and thinking I had solved a problem. It was very, very clear. So, but I did have an experience. I was crying at the relief and the like, oh, and I did have an experience. Now that experience, I did wake the next morning. I couldn't speak. And of course, which led me to the doctors, which was a very pro-survival thing to do. At the time, I better go to the doctors, I can't speak, which was the beginning of, he said, you know, you're in a severe state of depression. So of course, in that process, I felt I'd failed, you know, I have to take antidepressants. And I thought, I'm a failed mother. I have failed at everything. I did have a good doctor back those years. I'm nearly 60 this year, so this is some time back. And he just said, no, you've tried to be Superwoman and your body's going, sorry, I'm not keeping up. So he said, this is just going to bring your chemicals back into balance. So I was with him for about 3 months, and he was a good doctor. He walked with me, not just prescribing. I would have to go in and have a bit of a chat. So at 3 months, I said, you know, I feel really good. And one of the things that he did say is the mountains are going to come back to molehills. I couldn't go to the letterbox. I couldn't, nothing. And of course, that's exactly what happened. And so I said to him, you know, I'm feeling good. I want to start coming off. So we did that process. But I remember playing with the girls. We were out in a park and they were laughing and giggling, and Darren was playing and I was laughing and watching them play, that I had this overwhelming moment where I was just like, whoa, how am I feeling this joy and this ascetic feelings? And how did I get down to that? I dedicated my life to find that answer. And the moment I had decided that, life started opening up in all these interesting ways. So I'm going to say my life's been very guided. None of the things that I've done I thought I'd be doing, not one, but it absolutely took me on that path. So I ended up doing many, many things. And I had a wonderful time exploring, discovering. I got to travel overseas. I worked overseas, met some wonderful people. And of course, so around about 40, just to cut the story short, I really felt I'd come to this place. I understood many things. I was working and helping others. However, I was a bit like what John was saying he came to. There was a loop. It's like there's a clearing in this way, but it sort of shows up somewhere else. So I started to become very aware of that in myself and with others. And so I started to inquire. I did a lot of self-inquiry into what is this loop. So I went into deep meditation, and I was given experiences and things, but I understood it, but I didn't. Is the only way I can explain it. And so I did know at the time, words were just pointers. They're not the thing. So I said, give me some words, because I get it, but I don't. And I just heard, it's to do with the mind, dear. And that was the last thing I wrote. A week later, I went into the biggest crisis, which I saw at the time of my life. My husband and I had been together since we were 16. So we'd been together a long time. And he came home and he said, I'm not feeling that this is working, and I don't know whether I want this anymore. And I'm feeling I'd come into this place of what's been created. This is great. And I completely emotionally collapsed. And in that collapse, I was also aware, like, how am I being so emotionally overwhelmed? Like with everything that I understood, I couldn't think my way out. I couldn't do anything. I was emotionally out of control with such an experience that it frightened me. I thought, okay, I've gone too far. So I did resign. When I say resigned, I was like, I resigned from all of it. I don't want to do any of this anymore. I don't want to work in it. I don't want to talk about it, nothing. And so I did ride that emotional wave alone for some time. It's probably about a month. And then things start happening. So I had a friend that contacted me that I'd known from other work. She'd built this beautiful retreat and had been looking for me to come and work there. So of course, she asked me to come and work there, and I said, I'm not interested. It's all crap. And she was like, are you okay? I was like, best I've ever been. But anyway, I loved her. And she said, well, she would have known. She would have. She said, well, do you want to come up and have a look at the retreat? So I did. So it was like life looks after life. I can't unknow that. I've had too many experiences. So I could sense at the time, she'd ask me up for a tea, or she'd say, come and look at this, or look what's happening. I resisted a lot, but she would just say this one thing and I'd go, okay, because I loved her. So there was this lovely walking, and she'd ask me more often, and could you just help me decorate the shop? So I would do little things like that. Anyway, as she was getting ready, so I had maybe about a month and a half doing that. And I would talk to her about things, what she was doing. I told her not to ever talk to me about anything. Don't reflect, nothing. I wasn't interested. I met Kaya, and Kaya was the practitioner, one of the practitioners that were going to be part of the whole retreat center. It was a big plan. It was a beautiful center. And she was always poking at me. You know, what are you doing? I said, nothing. I'm just Suzanne's friend.
Nothing.
But she would keep poking. And this one, she asked me something. I cannot remember to this day what it was. And I just answered her with whatever. And she said, oh, something like John Avery would say. And I said, oh, I know John Avery. She said, yeah, he's 74 now. And I went, oh, I don't know John Avery. But it was a very familiar, very strong, I know John. And of course I went, oh, I don't know John Avery. So the next day I had another person mention and ask me, did I know John Avery? I said, no. I said, Kaya mentioned John yesterday. Now, most of the main teachers in my life or paths have always come with a person's name. And I don't know them, or I feel I know them, but they come 3 times. It's just a noticing. So the second time it came on the next day, it did get a part of my attention. But I was like, I'm not interested. So the next day after that was the grand opening. And Suzanne had asked me, would I just do guest relations? She didn't have enough staff. She didn't, they were all going to be showing the people around. And I said, look, that I can do. I'd stabilized a little. I said, that I can do. Just inviting the people in, putting their feet in a bowl of beautiful essence flowers and an organic tea. So I've got dressed up in their uniform. I go to the door. This gentleman arrives. And so I say, hi, my name's Sherrie Hatfield. Welcome to the retreat. And he said, hi, my name's John Avery. Now, in my inner world, it was like, oh, no, I'm not going there. I mean, I said, no, I'm not going here. So, but hi, John, nice to meet you. You must know Kaya. He said, yes, I do know Kaya. So I walked him over, sat him down, made an organic tea. And then he just looked at me and he said, so what do you do here, dear? And it was just this big energy movement. And I catharsis in the middle of the foyer.
Wow.
My inner world was very much like, oh dear, not now, because I didn't care. I had no resistance because I just didn't care. And so when it finished, I just allowed it to finish. I've looked up and John is just got this essence sitting there in front of me. And he said, are you all right? I said, not really. I said, so I'm just going to get you someone else. And he just said to me, never changed. It was the one thing that I saw most of all. And he said, look, I work in the field myself. I might be able to help you with that, dear. And I could feel this whole other shift, which was all about, don't talk to me about anything. I had resigned. And I did say, and it felt quite blunt. Can't bring it back now. That identity's gone. But it was, how's your premise any different? I wasn't interested. Do you know he never changed? He didn't throw off. That's what I noticed more than anything. And he answered me. He actually answered my question. And he said, oh, it's to do with the mind, dear. That caught my attention big time because it's the last thing I wrote. And that threw me into another, like, oh, no. And I just started to cry. And I said, look, give me your card and I've got to go and get you someone else. So I said to Suzanne, I can't help you. John needs someone else. And I waved at her walking out the door and got in my car and drove home.
Wow.
I felt all emotionally, again, all over the place. But it was so haunting that I got up the next morning and I'd learnt in my journey that only relief I got when it became haunting like that was to do it. Some wonderful lessons by doing that, but the haunting is really quite. So I did say, all right, I'll go, but it has to be today. But I'm not interested. So I rang John and said, hi, it's Sherrie. I met you at the door of Living Harmony yesterday. And he said, oh, yes, dear, I remember you. My inner world's like, I'm sure you do. And of course I said, listen, I'm ringing to see if I can have an appointment. All that was on his card was, it used to be called MIP. It was emotional. I don't even think it was
Mental
emotional.
image procedures.
Yeah, mental imaging procedure. I didn't look, I didn't ask, nothing. And so I said, you know, I'd like to have a session. And he said, because I was doing like a bit of a loophole, if he says next week, I'm not going. And he said, oh, wonderful. He said, could you make it at 10 o'clock today at all?
Damn it.
So I've always honored that part. I've had a lot of experiences in that. And as resistant as I was, those callings, the John Avery, to do with the mind, dear, the appointment, I went. I cried all the way down. I remember walking in the door. I just broke down and he said, it's all right, love, that's why you're here. And he put me in the chair and he did the introduction. I don't remember a lot of it, but I do remember when he mentioned about the mind. It sort of caught my attention. And of course, we stepped into the first part of the process, which John is talking about, is the ruin. Once those two energy ridges, we call negative identities, were discreated, all that emotional feel that I'd been experienced was gone instantly. Plus, I also had deep insight to what had been playing out in my life. It was all done, all in that instant. And that experience in itself, absolutely, in my inner world was like, I found it. I had this whole, I found it. I've got it. And then we did the rest of the session. Well, by the time I'd finished the session, I was laughing. I was in awe all at the same time. I'm thanking John profusely. I gave him a hug. And of course, I'm walking out the door and I remember going and looking back at him and saying nothing and then walking forward. And then I'd sort of look back at him. But by the time I got to the door, he just went, Sherrie. And I turned around, he said, go and live your life, love. And I had this, I said, I am. I'm gonna. Well, I'm driving home. The radio's on. I'm singing. Now, this is me in hindsight. I'm not thinking. And I'm singing away to one of my favorite songs that came on the radio. And next minute, it was like, ugh. Oh my God, I'm singing. It was like I saw because it's a two-way highway. It's like I saw myself going down the highway only 2 hours earlier. Oh my God, my life, this is bullshit. I'm not going. This is ridiculous. I'm done. To me going like this, up the other way of the highway. And that's when I went, no way. No way can it be this simple. I've been doing so many things. And so I started to think about the things that were being said in my relationship, the things that we were conflicting around. Nothing. It's like, oh. So I continued home. And it was just in the doing. I'm telling you this in hindsight. So I came home. I started to clean the house. I started to answer emails. It was all just movement. My husband had been away working. So that's where he was sort of out of the home. But anyway, I'm answering emails. Next minute I hear Sherrie, and it's my husband. And I did get a sort of a, oh, but he came on in and he started to speak as where we were at. Let me just put it that way. And I just stopped and I said, listen, I'm answering emails. Look, please don't talk to me like that. When you're ready to talk, I'll be here. And I do remember his face going, oh, okay. And so I shut the door and I was typing. So I'm just doing. And it was only when I was tired, I went, oh my God, I didn't feel anything when he said that. Every time he spoke prior, I was just going down into emotional crying. I couldn't cope with the whole thing. And I was like, whoa, who was that? And it was just this instant, oh, that'd be me. And I kept answering the email, which was even more. So anyway, next minute, there was a knock on the office door and Darren said, can we talk? I said, yeah, sure. Now my inner world was like, okay, I can handle this. I'm not happy with what could be unfolding here, but we do need to handle it. A 14-year-old son at home. And next minute he was talking and I was listening from this whole other place. I didn't respond. I had felt nothing to say. And so my inner world's going, I'm not being triggered. I'm not feeling any of those things. And so I responded where there were moments where he asked me a question, but within half an hour, he was crying and then going, I don't know what I'm doing. This is not what I want. My whole inner world was watching this whole thing unfolding, going, I don't believe this is like, it was just unfolding. And we ended up having a 3-hour conversation and the whole thing just moved and changed. There was no technique. Learned a lot of techniques, none, because it was all in the naturalness and it would be me having oh, what is that? And that I started getting on with it. It's one of its biggest gifts is you just get on with it. There's no going back, no managing, no thinking. And probably about 2 weeks later, I noticed another little trigger because John had said, and if anything makes you go round and round or brings you down, give me a call and we'll run it and get back on out there. And so I rang for another session and I just knew. I knew I'd been brought there. And that's when I said, when's your next training? And that's when I trained. So I walked very closely with John. John trained us in-house. And so it was always in great relationship. I never felt a teacher-student relationship. John and John were very much about, you know what I know. We're just getting your attention on. You're an all-knowing being. You know you better than anyone. That's how they introduced the session. So they lived it. So that whole training for me was the most insightful and undoing what we're not instantly. And gently and lightly, not all this talking and non-talk. The one thing John said to me at the beginning of the session, he said, listen, everything that's brought you here to this point, I want you to leave on the ledge. It's a little pathway. I want you present with me so you can take each step with me, but don't step to the left, don't step to the right. You'll be on the other side. When you're on the other side, you can bring over what you want. You've got no idea my inner world. That was the biggest relief. I remember having this, that's probably when I settled into the session, meaning I was going to now, it was like, oh, thank God, because I was done. It itself was profound and there was none, no self-disclosure. And it was life-changing. It was absolutely life-changing. And so that's what brought me to it. I really felt I was guided to it, but it did answer completely. How did I get from here to feeling the ascetic? I'd found the answer. It's all I've been doing now for 20 years. I don't do all the other work.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how long ago that was now. So yeah, 20 years. Wow. Yeah, incredible. And Sherrie, my understanding is that you did have a part to play in the continued evolution of the process as well.
Yeah, well, that just unfolded because of the joy of doing. It becomes, I think John said it beautifully, good things just start happening. Your flows just open up, and so that's what was happening. It was just this flow and engaging and conversation. I could ring John when I was having a moment with a client that might have been having a little bit of difficulty with the process, and I would call him and he would say, okay, did you do this? Did you do that? Yes, yes. And then he'd say, listen, try that. And so I would do that, and that's how you get the experience. So they were always there. And as I got to know John Mace in that relationship through John Avery, it was the same. It was like, the only way I can say it is they just had space. I mean, they're busy and they were doing things, but there was space for all of us. They just didn't have all this other stuff in front of them. And so that's the other experience you have. They're being themselves and you could feel it. And of course, if they heard something, they would say, listen, you don't have an unpleasant feeling with that. And I'd be like talking. I do. Oh, well, close your eyes for me. You know, you didn't realize how subtle these could be. So they was very loving, was behind everything. So their intention, so when, you know, you're reading the vision statement, and I'd been involved in a lot of big businesses, a lot of places. And that's what I was helping at this retreat, was the vision statement and things like that. When I read them and they were living it. There's a big difference, and we can all sense it. We weren't speaking it. That's what kept keeping my attention more than anything, because I'd watched a lot of people speaking and not living. And that's what I wanted. Part of it was to be it. Talking about it is not being it. So I'd come to that sort of place as well at this point of the journey, where life came along and said, okay, you've done enough of that now. We're going to take you here. And that's where I felt I was taken. So that in itself is creating relationship. And then I went to Hong Kong. I took Mace Energy Method over to Hong Kong. And I had a person say to me, so that was about 2 years I was practicing. And a person asked if I would train them. So I said, oh, yes, well, I'll put you in contact with John Mace, or there's John Avery. So I tried to ring John Avery and busy. So I rang John Mace, you know, because the person's there and she wanted to know. I said, John, there's a woman here in Hong Kong that would like to train. He said, good, sign her up. I said, no, not for me. I told her that, you know, you or John Avery, and she'd really like to do that. And she's got internet and all these things. And he went, well, why are you asking me? He said, you train her. I said, oh, no, I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready. And he said, well, you best close your eyes then. Got a feeling with that? Yeah, I do. And he ran it. I mean, I'm going to. Now, I didn't decide to do it then, but it had triggered up a feeling, and that's what it's about. And that's what so I just was like, oh, well, I can do it, and I'm ready. Now, she didn't end up training or going any further. But when I came home, I had actually had Kaya, who had mentioned John Avery in the beginning, come to me and said, Sherrie, now I don't know what you were doing. I can't remember. This is 20 years ago. And she said, can you train me doing the Mace method? I was talking to John and he said, you know, well, why don't you ask Sherrie? So I don't know what you were doing, John, at the time. You might have been traveling down to New South Wales. I don't know. But I was like, well, I'll ring him and ask. And of course he said, well, go and do that. And that's when I signed up my first trainee. So I would talk to John because they have written stuff up for the trainers and what I needed to do to get ready. And they walked with me through the training. because it's a very walk with me type program. It's not just teaching at you. It's very lived experience. And then I got an inquiry for a second training. And it's just been that the whole time. And so we would get together about training. There was more and more training and trainees. And so as it was getting bigger, we're having more conversations about the training. And I had done a lot of facilitating and a lot of group work. That's my big background. And so when we talk about things and what I'd noticed and what John would engage what he'd noticed, and that's how things would be created. So all I can say is it just kept unfolding in the journey. And that's why there are times when I go 20 years and it feels like it was only a month ago, you know, or a year ago. It's timeless. And so, you know, as John was getting on, you know, he would he did go through a little bit of shingles. So there was a lot, he went quieter in the training. So John and I would be in a lot of contact, but we would always be sharing the stories back with John. He loved it. He loved meeting everybody. He loved meeting all the trainees when they're certified. He just delighted. So it was very connective. It's the only way I can say that. And so I've been engaged in a lot of things, a lot of admin systems. We built the website one bite at a time. There were others who'd done it prior to me. Everyone has always in this collective shared a resource. It's like everyone shows up and they just share because you being more of you, it's our natural state. So I'd say I've just been in the game a long time, and that was a big part of my role, was training. Most definitely.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Brilliant. What really caught my attention in that, Sherrie, was the couple of words you said in that: pro-survival and how subtle they can be. And that's really been eye-opening for me. I'm so thankful I went straight from my foundation sessions into training, because I remember those moments where you would say to me, "Close your eyes, Helen." I'd be thinking, what's she doing? What's she on about? And then I realized, oh, there was something negative there that just was so subtle and so accepted as just how it is. It didn't seem like something to use the process on, and how those things feel and seem like they're pro-survival until they're gone. And then you're like, oh my goodness, that was that was crazy. Why was I behaving that way? But it makes sense while you're in it. It makes total sense, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's one of the most beautiful, because we'd watched the movie years back. I don't know how old it is now, but it was Pay It Forward. And it was it's really touched me because, you know, when you access that in yourself, and we've all had moments accessing it, especially if you're on this path. And there's this natural sharing. And so then you would share, and then there's all this confusion, like people take me for advantage, I'm getting used, blah, blah, blah. All the noise, as we know now, is part of these things we unknowingly create. And so that feeling kept getting stronger. And then the Pay It Forward movie came out, and I remember being so touched by it. It's like, yeah, you can live it. That's what I want to live, without worrying about what other people think, all these other noises. And that was the other thing, that when I stepped into the training, how we would connect, how I was walked through the program, to then me doing a session with someone else, and then even training, and then watching the practitioner do it. So it is the most beautiful Pay It Forward I've ever been a part of. It is truly a pay it forward, because we're not analyzing or evaluating what a client's moving through, even what they're presenting that they'd like to work with. We just, okay. So it's really walking with them and letting them unfold that for themselves, because we had it and we've had the experience, and there was no interference about what it was, how it's to be, how it should be. And that was the freedom in itself.
Yeah, the equality, that's what keeps coming through for me and everything that you're sharing as well. The equality between student and teacher, the equality between practitioner and client. Yeah, there is that, like, we all know it, we've all been there, we've all been in that situation. There's zero judgment. it's absolute equality. And as you said, yeah, we're not learning anything. We're not being taught anything. We're removing all the stuff that stops us being ourselves. Yeah.
I love John Avery's words. You're triggering me now. These are the positive triggers. John Mace, I remember. And I was always delighted in sharing what I'd accessed. So I'd be like, la, 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 and John, and and this happened. And oh my God, it was magnificent. And I said, I just love how you've brought the simplicity out of so many things. I'd studied many other philosophies, teachings, and all in the causism. It's all in simplicity. It's all there. And I found that very profound. And so I was sharing that with him. And I said, it was wonderful how you brought this through from life to share with life. And he just looked at it. They just lived it. And I could still see his face going, well, you know what I know, dear. I just had my attention on it earlier. I was like, of course. And you will see his intention. Because on the back of the Causism book, it says knowledge belongs to all. No group, no individual, no group or organization owns it. That's what he was speaking about.
Mm.
You're it.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
they lived.
Yeah. Like you say, that's the crucial thing. The people, the all talk no trousers stuff, which I've done too.
Yes.
It's the living.
And I said, another thing I said to him was, and it deals with all these complexities and they're just discreated. And I mean, John and I could tell you stories for hours of what people were working with and the profound shifts, like in one session. Unbelievable. And I remember saying that something to John Mace. And I said, it's just amazing after I've done all my talking. He always kept it simple. He lived his principle, just keep it simple. And he said, well, yes, dear, of course. He said, imagine the world without the simplicity of the wheel. And I went, oh, of course. And that's why Mace Energy Method is the therapy, which are the principles of causism, can do what it does, because the simplicity of the wheel is the causism principles. We just stay there. And it doesn't matter what the manifestation, what they're trying to handle. And that's what John was talking about earlier, the evolution of that into its procedure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Amazing. So, John, you've been listening there to Sherrie's story. Is there anything you want to chip in from your things?
Very good. Now I'm thinking John Mace's favorite word was, don't forget KISS, K-I-S-S, keep it simple, stupid.
Right.
But what did come to mind was interesting during that time. John was very happy when everything started to move, and we were, Sherrie must have been amongst the first 2 or 3 people I'd ever trained, and that was all happening. And John told someone about this, and John Mace never ever had the idea he wanted to make $1 million out of this. He just wanted to help people and share. And I don't know if you know the story, but he wanted to give the data, explain the data to the university in West Australia and give it to them. He wanted it to spread out. And he went there and did a big talk one day, and he didn't talk a lot about how to do it, but what he said. And there was a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists turned up, and some of them stood up and said, "What you're saying is impossible. You can't do this." And John Mace's only answer was, "Just prove me I'm wrong then." That was his only answer. And he come away that day, and I'll never forget what he said. He said, "It's not going to work talking to those sort of people." He said, "We're threatening their survival. We can do something in a few hours that they want to keep people going for a couple of months." And I remember it's quite marvelous what John said back there. He said, "We've got to find some opinion leader who people will listen to that's happy with what we're doing." You know what I mean? It's not going to come from us. And he did used to say, "I'm a technician, I'm not a promoter," And he said, "We've got to find this special man." In our old days, we used to call this somebody who was an opinion leader. That means they all respect them. And of course, Jerry Markiski turned out to be that. And very unfortunately, John's not here to witness what's happening. So I thought about that. And now I thought about a few things while you were talking, Sherrie. You remember you know, we did some of the first training over here of you know, people, and John packed up and came over. Remember, him and
Yes.
Pauline, his wife, they came over and spent some time with us. He said,
Yes.
"You're training more people than me over here. What are you doing?" "I'm coming over to have a look." And he was just gorgeous, and that sort
It
of
was a
thing.
joy. And you know, he had the strongest intention.
Oh, unbelievable.
Unreal, but so much love behind it. Like I can't explain it any
That's
other
it.
way. Experience it, but it was strong. There was no movement. Go on.
A lot of the early people thought that he was a bit abrupt, you know, and a bit, but he's just was his intention. He didn't suffer fools gladly, let's put it that way, and that sort of thing. So they'd complain to me, "Oh, he's a bit abrupt, he's a bit direct," and that. I said, "He was a ship's captain. Who questions a ship's captain?" And they said, "Oh God, nobody," you know.
Yeah, I
and
can
if
remember.
you
You
might want to delete this later, but I was over in his house sometime later one time, and he's storming around the house doing things. And I said to his wife, you know, Pauline's a lovely lady, and I said to her, "We've got to help him get rid of that captain identity one day." And she put her hands up like this. "Please," she said, "please." He came up the passage. "What are you two talking about?" and I'm probably the only one that could get away with it, but I told him, I said, "We're going to, you know, delete that captain identity." And he finished up laughing. He saw the joke in it. But he just wanted to get this out to the world and help. That was all that his intention was.
Yeah.
No, very good. We all had a lot of fun.
Yeah. So I was actually going to ask you both what, if you were to summarize John Mace, what would you say? So I've already heard you say, like, his love, he didn't suffer fools gladly, always kept it simple. Is there anything else that you would say really epitomized?
Well, he came over like the captain bit. He did come over as being a bit direct and that, but I knew him personally. And I'd seen him talking and seen his expressions, and he was underneath that, he was the biggest softy in the world. That's the best way I can explain it, and that sort of thing. But like he'd be anything he needed to be to get the job done, and that sort of thing. And he was, you know, quite direct. But I just loved it. Him and I got on good right from the beginning. We sort of, I don't know, we sort of complimented each other a bit. I think I helped him and he helped me a lot.
That's what I got.
Both, the training that the stuff that we was doing early, we'd both done it, so we understood each other and where we were coming from with all that, and that sort of thing. But no, he's a beautiful guy. What do you think, Sherrie?
Oh, absolutely. I got to witness that. It's almost like, you know, when you've got two parents, there's lots of qualities in each parent. And John Mace would say absolutely that, you know, my role was the research. And even towards the end, I mean, he knew he was leaving the material universe. He never said, "When I die." He said, "When I drop my body." He lived it. He didn't just have the data. In one of our things, there's knowing about and knowing. It was in knowing the whole time. He never said, "I'm going to die," or "when I die." He said, "Now, when I drop my body," it was all very matter of fact. "Now, when I drop my body," and I'd be like, "Oh, don't drop it yet." He would just laugh. So, but there was always that would come through that was just, well, it was his own beingness, and it was that love. And but it's almost, how can I? So John would say at the end, "My job is done." He said, "I've played my part." You know, and he talks about all that in his book. I mean, he wasn't talking about something. He wrote a beautiful article called "Discovery versus Invention." This is not an invention. It is a discovery, accessed. So again, that's why I would say, well, you know what I know. That's why everyone that's had a Mace experience access the same thing. That beautiful wisdom. So that was John Mace's part. Because I became a witness to both Johns, John Avery, and now he does tell you about his communication course, which isn't about how you speak. It's deeper than that. It's behind that comes first. It's dynamic, unbelievable. John Avery was definitely the communicator. He was the bridge. And he bridged it to all of us as trainers. He just had a way of presenting it. So the two of them absolutely complemented each other. So John Avery, I would hear in our conversations, would communicate to John the dynamics of what he was seeing with the trainees and the clients. And John Mace would go, oh, okay, I could see what you're saying. Because he was staying with the principles, the technology of it, and then John could communicate what was going on. So I always saw them as, you know, the two that absolutely played their parts.
Yeah, perfect partnership.
Yeah.
In Australia, we were just good mates, working together.
Yeah.
So I actually feel privileged to be able to be along on the trip with him. He did all the technician, I assure you. I come up with a few little things here and there that fitted in and he liked, and, you know, I was the first one to use delete an identity, and he loved that. You know, he'd pick up things you'd say. He said, that's right. I said, well, I'm new on the computer, but deleting means it's gone forever. And he said, great. You know, I said, I think that's the best word to use. And all this development was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. And early on, when I didn't have the computer, he had to write everything to me. I'd call him, and then he'd write things. He said, for God's sake, get a computer. I'm sick of this writing. You know, he'd get after me with love. But then in the early days also, I started doing sessions over the telephone. I did many over the telephone, you know, quite well. And then we'd you know, the little fee we were charging back in those days, we'd charge them over Skype. And then we started doing ones on Skype overseas. And it was all part of the development. And, you know, being on Skype is just the same as having someone in your office. I did many. I had a nice house where I was working and a nice office. And I did many face-to-face ones for years and had some of the best experiences, you know, of different people at different times, and Sherrie's had hundreds too, and that sort of thing. You learn as you go along. You know, I can think of things that part of the development. One time I had a client come and she was very, very happy, this lady. Then she rang me and she said, my daughter's going to a nice college. She's about 15, and she said she's been bullied at school, and she won a scholarship. She said she's been bullied at school, and her work's gone so bad they're thinking about cancelling her scholarship. And I said, oh no, bring her over Friday. We'll see what we can do. When she finishes school, bring her over. So this little girl came and we did a beaut session on her, and she just ran beautifully, and we cleaned it all up. And at the end of the session, she said she felt so big. So I had a big realization that day. She felt so big. And I just filling in a couple of things on her report, you know, to keep a record of what we'd done. And I said, what can I do for this young lady? So I said to her, do you like that feeling big? And she said, oh yes, it's absolutely wonderful. I said, well, listen, this is for you, and I don't want you to tell other people. This is something for you to remember. I said, in future, when anything upsets you, close your eyes for a quick second, remember how big you are now, then you handle the problem. And tell me one day, and I never saw her for about 3 months after that, but about a week later, her mother rang up and she said her and that bully are now best friends at school. That was the first report I got. And her mother was sold vitamins, and I'm a bit of a nut on those. And so I'd gone to one night, and she was there 3 or 4 months later. So I never talk about sessions in front of somebody when somebody else is there. I finally got her on her own later. I said, how you going, Missy? How's things going? And she just looked at me without batting an eyelid. She said, since I came to you, she said, any problem I get, I just get bigger. I could absolutely do anything now. She nearly bowled me off my feet. I mean, like, the power coming out of her was unbelievable. And so those sort of things will never disappear out of my memory, I'm afraid. You know,
Mm.
I still remember her face when she said that, and she was just so confident. There wasn't a single bit of, and all she spent in session was about an hour and a half. You know, so marvelous.
Yeah, incredible. Incredible. Yeah. So there's been a really strong theme in this of natural evolution, natural flow from both
Yeah,
of you and through the evolution of the Mace method. It's been this one step in front of the other. And like you said, Sherrie, all the people have joined who've brought whatever resource was needed for that particular time. So, and I know you've spoken a little bit there about John Mace, how he would have wanted to see this. That was his main thing, was wanting to see it grow in the world and spread to more people. But if you were to bring it to you now, and bearing in mind, I get that, you know, flow and evolution, we can't predict what's going to happen next. But if you each brought it to what matters to you as the Mace method moves forward, what would that be? Sherrie, you go first.
I just got all goosey with that question. That's a big feel in me. To continue exactly that. That it's deeper than my thinking. As I said, I think from the beginning, I've been brought to it. And it has been the greatest expression of what I was wanting to understand, of know thyself. There's all this intellectualizing, there's all these pointers. I live it. And this is the expression that it comes through. So naturally, there's no effort. There's no, I learn, you know, what John's talking about, is to just keep letting people know about it. Because absolutely, this is the biggest wave, as John had said, you know, opinion leaders. John always knew. He knew. He used to say things like, I'll tell you now, when it hits the States, it's going to go like a grasshopper. And it has been. And now it's expanding quite fast in the UK, Ellen, because of your own sharing and your own presence. And of course, Jerry was in the US. So when that arrived, or, you know, I used to say that quite early. It's like, well, here it is. So what it means to me is exactly, John communicated it, and John Avery communicated in these words, but it's deeper than the words. And I don't know how many people have shared, I read John's book, or I need to train. It's just got a deep resonance. That's their own beingness. That's why we don't sell the training. We've got nothing to sell you. You'll know. Yep. And it will just be a part of that flow. And that's why when people arrive, it's like this welcome. They're all saying, thank you so much. And we're going, no, thank you. This is the flavor that's expanding, and we're all it. So we love it. So it's like when you arrived, it was like, cool. Well, it comes with that. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So, as it is.
Yeah, I definitely felt that resonance as well. Yeah, I love it when people come to me and they're like, I don't know why I'm here. I haven't even read anything about it. I usually would read all the stuff, but I haven't read the stuff, but I'm here. So it's like, brilliant, perfect. Yeah, yeah. So John, how about you then? If you were to think about how you would love to see it unfolding from here.
What was that? How?
If you were to think about how you see the Mace method unfolding from here, what's your dream? What would you love?
Yes. I'm not being negative, but there's a few areas that still need to be handled and addressed. I was a 10-year-old during World War II, and had an uncle of mine, and we exchanged. He was in a place that was very famous called Tobruk, and he wrote letters to me the whole time. And I used to feel like I was with the soldiers. I used to feel like I was with them. But anyway, so I had a great desire. I heard about soldiers coming back like all upset. I had a wonderful desire to help soldiers. And I was living in a place called Nambucca, which is on the east coast of Australia. A few years back, and I heard them talking at a Returned Soldiers League club, that the bosses one day about and I explained to them like that I was connected with something, and I had been for almost 20 years at that time. And I said, have you got any soldiers that are still in trouble? He said, quite a few that came home like 8 to 10 years ago. I said, look, I'm not looking for money. I want to prove what we can do to soldiers, and I have their respect. I saw the boys go in World War II and come home all beat up, and I want, and they were thrilled when I had a good talk to them. And I said, you know, it's not hard, and it won't upset them, I guarantee you. Anyway, they were so excited, and they were going to talk to 2 or 3 of these boys, and I was going to do them. And I thought, this is a goal that I haven't achieved yet, and I personally probably won't now too. But however, a month or so went past, and I finally got these 2 men that were talking. I said, what happened? They said, oh, they talked to the psychiatrist, and they're not allowed to talk to you. They won't let them talk to us. I said, they're going to keep going and taking their drugs and feeling bad, and it's still years later. I said, this is only one of them for a couple of hours each, but it just couldn't happen. So I'm still very, you know, not feeling good about that, because I did have an experience to handle a young man early on, probably 15 years ago, and he'd been to Afghanistan and had a terrible thing happen. I won't even go into it, but he did finish up telling me a little bit afterwards. I told him not to tell me about it, but he had a big upset there, and he still had post-traumatic stress disorder very badly. And we cleaned him up, and he just felt like $1 million, and he was as good as gold, and the whole trauma disappeared. And at the time, I told John Mace, and John Mace said, great, this is what we want to do. And John sort of wanted his email address and talked to him, and wanted him to do a referral and tell everybody what had happened to him. But then he got upset, this young man, and we sort of lost him. And I suddenly realized that he was also about to start a university course, which was part of his, reward for being a soldier. And I think if he'd have said that he was already fixed up, that might have put that in jeopardy. So it's never happened. So that's something. And all the policemen that do, we have done some policemen, but we did a few, and they did very well. Policemen that had, bad experiences with a gun pointed at their face and this sort of thing. And so we still got to break into those areas, but I'm quite confident in the future those things will happen. And once they realize that these boys can be fixed up in a few hours and not 12 months or a couple of years, and like Jerry McKiskey said, what did he say? That and I think he was a psychiatrist, wasn't he, Sherrie?
Yeah,
or psychologist?
Psychotherapist, psychologist. Yep.
Yeah, but he said psychiatrists are just drug peddlers, giving people drugs. It doesn't fix anything. It just makes them, makes them dumb. And I'm hoping one day that I'm seeing in the future that that's going to get handled and people won't have to take their drugs. Mm. And John Mace had a beautiful idea that there should be a Mace practitioner in every school to handle school children. Like I've handled them with study problems, with, fighting, all sorts of different things. And it's only, with the children, it's only half, 3/4 of an hour to fix them up. They fix up so quickly. And somebody in a school, if they're having trouble with their study, lots of them with their study, as soon as you get rid of their bad feelings, they're back in control of their life, doing what they want to do. So I can see all this happening in the future. Mm. That's what I hope, and that's what I see. Yeah. And good people like this young lady here that's listening to us, are training people, it's going to happen.
Yeah, thank you. Well, and coming to the trigger, John was, I don't know how many clients I've had in the last 4 years. So I don't know what shifted out there in that counselling and psychology world. But I've had more clients when they've said they're dealing with anxiety and depression, more so the anxiety, and we've finished and it's gone. I've had them cry going, oh my God, they've been telling me I have to learn to live with it. I was like, what? They're telling you to live with it? And they have burst into tears because it's over. They believed they would have to live with it, and they do not. Neither do they have to live with depression. And that's a big field. Mm-hmm. So absolutely we'll open. That's why I believe all of you arriving. We've got now practitioners who have been in the military because they've had post-traumatic stress. I got a gentleman I'm training now. He's in the army, post-traumatic stress for many, many years. He found a practitioner in Scotland, had a session, and then just said full foundational session. Then he went for another one. I think he did the activity procedure, said to the practitioner, I need to train in this. There are so many men and my friends. We're just all
wonderful. There you go. That's how it'll probably happen.
Thought I'd just share that with you, John. Yes, he's just begun training, and he said,
get those soldiers. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And just little things of like proving the power of the part of the Mace method is that people do not have to talk about their private life in any way. And that's triggered me. I hope this fits in and it's okay. But I had a young lady once, and I'm doing the introduction to a nice young lady, you know, probably in 25 or so. And I said to her, you don't need to tell us any stories or anything that, you know, that's happened to you. That's not necessary with what we do. And she broke into tears, and I couldn't stop her for about 5 minutes. And I finally said, I'm sorry, what did I do? How did I upset you? You didn't upset me. She said, I'm so happy. I've been telling that story every 2 weeks for a year. And I'm so happy I don't have to tell it again. I said, no, we're not interested. You know what I mean? And then, of course, we can put their attention on whatever that was and just handle the feelings, the residual feelings from that, and then it's gone. You know, and like you say, that can't be so simple. I said, you know, I've actually apologized to people. I'm sorry. I said, it is. You're happy you come. Oh, I'm thrilled.
How many of us did that? What?
At least half the people.
Yeah, that absence of story is a perfect example of that simplicity of it. We don't have to go into all the tangle of the stories and the who said what and did what, and no. It's just get to the simplicity. It's part of that perfection, isn't it, of the whole process? Yeah.
People wouldn't, Helen, in the early days, people wouldn't believe that you could do what you said you could do. And like when they were calling you over the phone, you could either get into a long conversation trying to sell them. My simple solution was, I said, listen, if you come for your session and you're not happy with at the end, there'll be no charge. Oh, you're so confident I'm coming. And that saved me a whole lot of yapping.
Yeah, incredible. So I'm hearing from both of you then the general direction of travel is continued evolution and unfolding, loads and loads of opportunities where this can make such a difference. And I would also wave a flag for people like me. When I always remember, Sherrie, the first question I asked you on an email when I first heard about it, I said, Sherrie, can this help people go from good to great? Because as I was sitting there, I thought, I don't have any big problems in my life. I'm not experiencing any big mental health concerns. Like I'm good. My life is good. And it was, you know, I wasn't experiencing any significant mental health concerns. And wow, how much the Mace method revealed to me that was still around in my system. So as well as absolutely, John, gosh, the magnitude of opportunity around people in any service of any kind, gosh, the health service here as well, and all emergency services, really, all military. But also for me, there's a lot of people who are doing well in life. They're playing the game of life apparently really well on the outside, while inside, and Sherrie, you spoke to that a lot, you know, the kind of my inner world, so many people in the outer world look like they're okay, look like they're successful, while inside there's all sorts of stuff going on. So yeah, to me, there's nobody, again, that equality piece, there's nobody excluded from the opportunities around this and what's possible.
Absolutely. And that's what John and John would say, because to keep it in its simplicity, we do create these unknowingly via upsets. Who in the world hasn't had an upset?
Yeah.
So most people think it's got to be trauma. There's a big thing around trauma now. It's like we grab on it. We class it as an upset, and an upset is anything you did not want to experience by choice. So we don't weigh it. It's how it made you feel.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Amazing.
What was the overwhelming feeling? There's another part we haven't mentioned, if I may, Helen, that as things developed, like from way back and you're developing, and then I think John discovered this first, somebody had some problem with their body. and he'd run a few feelings, and they got immediately better. So then that got added also, you know, personal experience. I did lots of dancing when I was young, or not young, but back a few years, and this guy had a very bad leg from an accident he'd had. So he became a very good friend, and he's very helpful to me. I said, come around one day. So I told him about what we did, and I did a basic session on him, and then addressed the leg problem. And when he came up the stairs to my house, he could hardly get up the stairs. And we handled it. And then I've handled a few feelings to do with his leg, and then asked him, how's it feeling now? He said, it actually feels good. I said, get up and give it a bit of a walk. So he started walking up and down the office, and he almost started to run. He said, I can't believe that. It's gone. And he went down the stairs like an 18-year-old when he went home. And like he told so many people about what we were doing, you know. but then, of course, then the Mace method is so simple. It can be addressed to lots of things, and a lot of body problems that people have gets held in place by the feelings connected with the accident or the something or whatever. And you just help them delete the feelings, find the feelings and get them to delete them. We don't delete them. We just guide people while they do it. We can't help anybody really. We can only guide them while they do it. But and that sort of thing. And that's another aspect that's just fantastic. And the same with people smoking, drinking, gambling. You know, I could go on about, you know, one lady, my favorite story, a lady came to me and what was your problem? She'd lost $46,000 while she'd been gambling on the poker machines. And so we gave her the basic session. Then I addressed the pokies for her. And she said she felt fine. And she called me back in a couple of weeks. I can still go and meet all my friends at the club. I've not never had the slightest thought about going near the pokies. She said, I play a couple of games of Keno, which costs about $1 a game to play, I think. I'm not very experienced with that. She said, we can have a nice afternoon and have a meal together with my friends, and I'm free. And she was so thrilled. And smoking the same, you know, people smoking. The only thing with smoking is I've had people come, they wanted to give up smoking. I said, why? And the man would say, my wife doesn't like it. And I say, well, look, I'm sorry, that's not quite good enough. When you want to give it up for you, the door is open, you come back. And I've had them come back 3 or 4 or 5 months later, and you know, about an hour's work after a basic session, about half an hour's work, and it's all done. And they give it up, and people are so pleased. Once again, the Mace methods put you back in control of your own life so you can live your own dreams. That's what John Mace said. And that's all it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought that might be helpful, Helen.
Absolutely. Some great examples, John. Yeah, thank you. It's so true. Yes, I had an eye problem, gone. I had
so great, the photos I got to see. It was great to capture that, Helen.
It turns out I had a crisp addiction. I used to eat crisps loads. My daughter said, I think we eat too many crisps. I was like, yes, you're right. And I just stopped. Gone. little side effect of some session somewhere along the way. But yeah, Sherrie, will you what would you like to share, Sherrie, before we close out the call? Any final thoughts, shares?
Well, the one thing that keeps coming to my attention, and you know, that could be to do with my journey, but it was to know thyself. And I've walked with so many people now, and they do all ask what they want to work with in their areas, but most of them, all of them, how they want to feel or be after the session is the same. And it shows that we know deep down our true innate knowingness, or we wouldn't be seeking. So I would say to the clients after some time, if you didn't have any of these negative thoughts or feelings or problems about yourself, would you be doing any self-help? I have not had a yes yet for 18 years. Wow. Not one. So deep down, we know. We're just, so if I come back to my experience in the manifestation of depression was problem solving. I want you to hear, it was we're problem solving, pro-survival beings. And so I had a problem, I was trying to solve it. Of course, it just turned in on a bit on myself and thought I was the problem. That's how it feels in that. But we're not. And I want people to know they are not the source of the problem. Personally, that's what we help you find, locate, and delete. You do not have to live with these negative thoughts and feelings. They are not a part of our natural state. We don't have to go all the long way to access that now. May have been part of the journey. I think it is part of the journey. Even yours, Helen. It's like I've noticed everyone comes to this certain point. And it's like life does good. You've done enough of that. Everyone that's come towards a Mace session has the most interesting story, how they found it. Books fell off in front of them. People gave it as a gift. Hilarious. Some people, Brian, I remember Brian, I said, oh, how did you hear about Mace? He trained. And he said, I was standing at a rock concert. I just thought I'd read a blog, which then went to a link, and I read about the Mace Energy Method. He was like, what is that? Read a bit further, and he said, I'm going to ring them tomorrow. That was it. So many interesting stories. So I think what I want to share is that it's time for us to come home unto ourselves. We know. And nurses, with people death and dying, it's all been shared. It's almost like it's all converging. The number one thing was, I wish I'd been more of myself. So what everyone's trying to do is come back to that. But they're either trying to get over the negative thoughts and feelings, they're trying to get around it. My childcare identity, I was a childcare educator for many years. It's like the bear on the bear hunt. They're going over it, round it. No, you've got to go through it. But not in talking about it. You can delete them. So that's what I want to share. And that's why we do have discovery calls. We do have in place, because it is only in the experience. Do you understand all the principles? Because they are pointers, and the resonance is more calling to you, because deep down you know. So we say we'll do the first part of the session. We do a bit of the intro. We'll do the first part of the session. If you do not move through the first part of that session for any reason, we don't weigh anything on it. We just stop the session and we don't charge you. Because if you don't move through the first part, you're not going to move through the rest. So it lets people just, okay, I'll explore and discover.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Lovely introduction, lovely welcome. Invitation, even, that's the word. Lovely invitation. Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you both so much.
You're welcome.
You're more than welcome, love.
Yeah, so interesting to hear things I've never heard from either of you for the first time about this this incredible evolution from the very beginning with John Mace and yourself, John Avery. And thank you, Sherrie, for coming for life and life, finding you and getting into it.
We're all here because we are.
Yeah, really fabulous, and look forward to seeing and being part of the next evolution.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just about to say, and how wonderful you're here, a part of that natural evolution, Helen.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes, Helen, thank you for your good work. John Mace would be smiling.
Absolutely.
You can't see him, but I bet he can see us, and he's smiling, I can guarantee
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Drop without his body, encumbering him anymore.
Not his body. So I'll say one little thing. He said it has been such a good game. I have enjoyed every moment of my life. I've never worked a day in my life. And then he sort of went, he said, you never know. I might play the game again and get another body. And I just said to him, no, that means then I'll be the older body and you'll be the young body. He laughed and laughed and laughed.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Helen. Bye.
Bye.